Shalom, Kalalayim, Layhawa Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of GMS that rule well, who I learned this truth from, and salutations and blessings to the 144,000 and the 1/3 elect. Alright, so this is a history lesson, and it's going to pretty much deal with Gauls, Celts, Druids, Franks, right? Different people like that. So this is from a book, first of all, from a book called When Scotland Was Jewish by Elizabeth Caldwell, Hirschman, and Donald N. Yates. Right? So this is from chapter 5, The Early Jews of France, and I have the part down highlighted here. It says, our primary source for this chapter is Esther Benbassa's The Jews of France, 1999. Benbassa is a Jewish historian, and her book is the most complete and well documented available on French Jewry. Benbassa describes the Jewish communities known to be present in France prior to 1500 AD, the time period of most interest to us. This era corresponds most closely to the first wave of Jewish arrivals into Scotland after 1500. We have the second wave of Jews coming to Scotland, the Sephardim fleeing the Inquisition, and we will discuss these as well. As Benbassa notes, Jews from Palestine arrived in Gaul, France, right? Because France was previously called Gaul, right? And those were a clan of people, which we're going to get into. It says as early as 135 AD, following the unsuccessful revolt by Bar Kokhba or Kokhba against Roman Emperor Hadrian. At this time, Jews were Roman citizens and not labeled as Jews per se. They could travel freely throughout the Roman Empire, which stretched from Britain to Central Asia. Right, and that's true. Even Paul, he was a Roman citizen, and he used that status for his defense in his favor, right? So this is a quote. Benbassa makes several important points on which we will comment. So this is the quote. It says, the Jews there in France did not all come from Palestine. Many of them belonged to the diaspora, made up in part by populations converted to Judaism. The Christianization of the Roman Empire under Constantine the pagan, all right, Constantine, he wasn't he was a pagan, man. He was an Israelite, but he was a damn pagan. All right, he he transferred sun worship, right? Female, what is that? Feminine, the femininity, right? Like Easter, which is I'm trying to find that word. I can't remember that word. All right, but it's a time of liveliness, right? Everything is springing forth, right? Forget the word, it's slipping my mind. But he brought in a lot of paganism, right? Sunday worship, right? Christmas, or Easter, which is Ashtar. Fertility, that's the word. I just said Ashtar. Fertility goddess, right? He pushed a lot of fertility, right? Fertility ideology, which is pretty much just it's rebellion, it's witchcraft, it's it's left hand side. But anyway, let me see. I just lost where I was. It says the Christianization under Constantine the Pagan, and the restrictions that gradually came to be imposed on the Jews favored their emigration, particularly to Gaul, which was slower to become Christianized. The settlement of Jews along an axis following the valley of the Rhone and extending from that of the Saône to its juncture with the Rhine corresponds to the route taken by the Roman legions, which Jews followed as soldiers, tradesmen, or merchants in search of a better life and more favorable economic conditions. Importantly, Jews were settled where they would have had contact with the Normans, which were Israelites as well. Normans means Northmen, right? Normans who arrived in Gaul from Scandinavia, right, in around 900 AD. So Jews functioned in Gaul and elsewhere as full-fledged Roman citizens without religious or ethnic hindrance, and were active traders and merchants. Right, that's what Jake does. Right, they go, they set up shop. They do their thing, man. You have a lot of Jakes in the corporate and business enterprise world, entertainment world. Right, they do their thing, man. They do their thing on the low. They do their thing loud. They do their thing, man. They're skilled. Right. Further, now this is DNA, which we don't, right? We don't subscribe to all that, because it's a that DNA, all those banks, man. They none but scammers, man. So it says, as Benbassa notes, the Jews dressed like the rest of the population, bore arms, and spoke the local language. So now you understand why in Acts 2, you've seen all those different names of those different lands where Israelites were, right? Even in the synagogue, Hebrew was not the only language used for rituals. Their ancestral names, Biblical Roman and Gallo-Roman, did not differentiate them from other inhabitants. So down here it says, together with the Byzantine and Syrians, Jews in France and elsewhere established international, overland, and maritime trading routes, controlling the bulk of Mediterranean commerce. Right? So now you understand Moors traveling to the Americas and back and forth, north, central, and south in the surrounding islands. Being pirates or being businessmen, So this is page 81. They exported slaves, furs, and silk manufacturers to Italy, Spain, and the Levant, which the Levant is that area that spans a bunch of countries from Israel to Syria to Jordan, right? To, Egypt, I believe, it stretches far to Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, right? And imported to Gaul spices, balsam, garum, dates, brocades, and precious metals. The crossroads of this luxury trade were located in the Meuse and at Narbonne. It says these traders could be found even in Paris, right? On the Ile de la Cite, near the forecourt of Notre Dame today. By the 800s, in France, contemporaneous with the first incursions of the Normans, the Jews constituted an indispensable part of the economy and culture. Benbassa, page 11, writes, they did possess buildings, fields, orchards, and vineyards, garden farms and mills. They devoted themselves to agriculture and in particular wine growing in the valleys of the Rhone, the Saône, and in the Paris region. Jewish wine production seems to have been still larger in the 9th century. These were all Israelites, man, of the diaspora, because that was one of the big part of the curses, is a dispersion. That's why James 1, it says to the Israelites that are dispersed, to the diaspora, right? To the Israelites that are scattered. It says, says, in addition to being accomplished vintners and wine merchants, the Jews of Gaul also excelled in finance, estate management, medicine, and manufacturing. A certain number of Jews managed the assets of bishops and abbots or abbots. Others were in the service of kings. They played an important role in east-west trade. They also practiced medicine. They were found too in trades such as the dyeing of fabric, which was very big in the ancient world, and the tanning and curing of leather. By 1066, when the Normans conquered England, taking several of these French Jewish families with them to establish the new civil administration, the Western world had embarked upon a capitalist economy. Now that was just to set up a little bit about the Gauls, so you understand. All right, and just for FYI, that's where you get the Galatians from, right? When Paul wrote to the Galatians, right? This is biblical epistle from Galatia, name of an ancient inland region in Asia Minor, from Greek Galatia, based on Gaul, in reference to the Gaulish people who conquered the region and settled there 3 century BC, right? So that's just the Greek way of saying Gaul. So now you know who Paul is writing to. Talking about they were Greeks and they were Edomites and they were white people. No, those are Israelites, right? Later known as Celts and all kinds of other names. Now this is from hold on one sec. This is from this page, cbcj or g.org, chapter 10, Celtic Saxon Israel moves into Northern Europe, British Isles. Now, again, I have to point out this is Esau pretty much trying to push that he was those people, right? But we know that these were dark-skinned people for the most part. And you can see that, what cuts them is the icons and the coat of arms and the illustrative manuscripts in the medieval times. That's what cut the coins, the marble busts, the statues, right? These things cut them because it shows other people, for the most part. So, hold on. So this is Celtic expansion in Europe. So it says by about 450 BC, most of the Sumerian Israelites had moved up the Danube and settled as Celts in Central Europe. Their Latin culture would gradually evolve over the next few centuries, but due to migratory pressure, the Celts would again find themselves being pushed further to the west and even to the south. Barbaric tribes invading from the far east pushed the Scythian Israelites westward, which in turn put pressure on the Celtic Israelites. Now, the Scythian, I did a lesson on it a few months ago, and I'm going to, this is going to touch on them again as well, because they were in the mix. The Scythians were known as Sacae, which is sons of Isaac, later known as Saxons, or Anglo-Saxons even, right? So it says, in fact, 2 Asiatic groups began to aggressively invade Scythia from the east. First, the Sarmatians from about 300 BC. Then the Huns beginning around 200 BC. Noted archaeologist E. Raymond Cap writes, like a domino effect, as Sarmatian pressure forced the Scythians toward the west, the Cimmerians were forced into the more remote regions of Europe, where they became known as the Celts and Gauls. Over time, these forced migrations would take the Celts into parts of northern or northwestern Europe, even as far as the coastal areas of France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And again, go look up those coat of arms and the crests, of Belgium, Netherlands. They're all out there, man. And southward into northern Italy and the Iberian Peninsula. What does Iberian mean? Iberia is where you get the word Ibar or Ibariath, which means Hebrew, which means past, of the past. Hebrew Peninsula, what is today known, or what is today Spain and Portugal. The center of Celtic expansion was Gaul, which lay north of the Alps in the region now within the borders of France and Belgium and parts of Spain. All right, it says the earliest the earliest Celts who were major players in the classical world were the Gauls, who controlled an area extending from France to Switzerland. It was the Gauls who sacked Rome and later invaded Greece. It was also the Gauls who migrated to Asia Minor to found their own independent culture there. That of the Galatians, the area known historically as Gaul, is generally inclusive of modern France, Belgium, Switzerland, Holland, northwest Germany, and northern Italy. Many writers define Gaul proper as lands extending from the Rhine and the Alps westward to the Atlantic. A considerable number of Celts later migrated further westward into Britain and Ireland by the later Latin period or Latine period. This Celtic culture had expanded over a wide range of regions, whether by diffusion, which is forced migration, or voluntary migration, to the British Isles, insular island Celts, France, and the Low Countries Gauls, much of Central Europe, the Iberian Peninsula. All right, now we go here. The Galatians, to whom the Apostle Paul addresses his New Testament epistle by the same name, were essentially an eastern branch of the Celts. Concerning their connection to ancient Israel, Davidi writes, according to conventional history, the British Isles, Gaul, France, and Belgium, and the northwest European coastline in ancient times were settled by people of Celtic culture. A predominant element among the Celts were the Galatians, who were ascribed Sumerian origin by classical writers. Down here it says, quoting the Greek philosopher Plutarch, 46 to 120 AD, Thomas writes, they, the Celts, were called the first Sumerians and then, not inappropriately, Cimbri. The philosopher Posidonius, 130 to 50 BC, also wrote that the Cimbri originated on the shores of the Black Sea, where they had been known to the Greeks and as the Sumerians. As the Sumerians moved to the northwest, they became known to the Greeks as Celts, but to the Romans as Gauls. So that's just some history. But I already established majority who the Gauls were. All right. According to the website lostcivilizations.net, the period of Celtic dominance in Europe began to unravel in the first centuries AD with the expansion of Rome and the ongoing influx of an Asian immigrant population, the Huns. By the time Rome fell in 476 AD, the Celts had been pushed west and north to England, Wales, and Ireland, and later to Scotland. 21. Similarly, the Encyclopedia Britannica notes the Celts moved westward, eventually reaching the British Isles, and went by the names Brythons and the Goidels. The Brythons crossed the Channel and established themselves in England and Wales, but the Goidels, probably in the 4th century BC, passed directly to Ireland. And what is that name Brython, where you get Briton or Brittonic or Britain? It means covenant. Later covenant man. British means covenant man. Right, Apostle Gabar did a very good lesson couple years ago, I think now. I don't even know sometimes because the time goes so fast. But he did a lesson on that on Britain and the British, right? So it all adds up, but we know it's not Esau. And like I said, how do we know? Through the icons. That's why they had a whole thing in the Renaissance where they had to destroy the icons via iconoclasm. So this is Anglo-Saxons dominate Baltic region, British Isles. The renowned British historian Sharon Turner wrote, the different tribes of the Scythians, like those of the Celtic, Cimmerians, and Gauls, had their peculiar distinctive denominations. Scythian bands migrating into northwest Europe included the Saxons, Danes, Vandals, Goths, Angles, Jutes, Alans, Lombards, Franks, etc. Many of these settled or moved through Scandinavia and the Baltic region. Of great importance were the Saxon and Angles. The Saxons were a powerful Scythian clan in northwest Europe. According to research by Rutherford, the geographer Ptolemy, 2nd century AD, referred to the Sacae as Saxons, and the historian Albinus, late 700 AD, said the Saxons were descended from the ancient Sacae from Asia. As we saw in chapter 7, Saxons literally means sons of Isaac. Turner writes, the Saxons were Germanic or Teutonic, that is, a Gothic or Scythian tribe, and of the various Scythian nations which have been recorded, the Sacae or Sacae are the people from whom the descent of the Saxons may be inferred. Sacae Suna, or the sons of the Sacae, abbreviated into Sac-Sun, which is the same sound as Saxon, seems a reasonable etymology of the word Saxon. Allied with the Angles, the Anglican peoples, the Saxons came to eventually dominate parts of England and Scotland. Davidi writes, from the Saka were to emerge the Anglo-Saxon invaders of Britain. Large formations of Saxons began arriving in northwest northwest Europe between 2 and 300 AD. The Angles, together with the Saxons or Sacae, and Jutes from Scythia, were to be the dominant elements in the conquest of England. From Jutland emerged many of the invaders of England. From about 250 AD, Gothic bands allied with their Celtic kinsmen began harassing the western parts of the Roman Empire, which were Israelites, ruling already, because this is 250 AD, right? So those emperors were Israelites already. Septimius Severus was 193 AD, and then Septimius Severus wasn't even the first Israelite emperor. It says, but he was a big part of it. His name was an omen nomen. It says, empire, while Anglo-Saxon pirates approaching from Scandinavia began intermittently attacking the coast of Britain. However, the Anglo-Saxon invasions of Britain would not commence for another 200 years due to resistance by Roman occupiers. Collins writes, Saxons from the eastern shores of the North Sea ravaged the coast of Britain and occasionally penetrated deep into the lowland zone. Until the end of the 4th century, the Roman Empire was strong enough to repair the damage done by the Anglo-Saxon incursions. However, Rome's hold on Britain soon deteriorated, forcing them to abandon the Isles altogether. Ultimately, the native British Celts invited the Saxons from the European mainland to assist them as mercenaries, but the Saxons eventually occupied much of England, pushing the native Celts into Wales and Scotland. Okay, now this is from another website. And this is from britam.org. And it reads, Early Hebraic Practices of the Celtic People. It says, we have shown before that at least part of the Celtic inhabitants of Britain at some time must have practiced part of the Mosaic law before they became Christian. We know, however, that most of the ancient inhabitants of Britain, before they became Christians, were pagans. They had worshipped pagan gods, and they had pagan priests named Druids. The religion of the Druids was a mixture of ancient pagan Canaanite practices from the Middle East, right? Because that included human and child sacrifice, which the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Perizzites, all those Hamites, they practiced human sacrifice and baby sacrifice, infant sacrifice, right? So Jake followed in fashion, man, wicked fashion. The religion of the Druids was a mixture of ancient pagan Canaanite practices from the Middle East, together with some Hebrew customs. There were some Hebrew elements in Druidism. When the Celts became Christian, they carried over into Christianity some of the customs of the Druids. There were biblical laws among the customs of the Druids that the British and Irish Celts continued to practice after becoming Christians. This explains in part why the original Celtic Christians of Britain adopted many Old Testament practices of the law of Moses. Now it says, concerning the Druids, Julius Caesar in his book The Conquest of Gaul wrote, the Druidic doctrine is believed to have been found in existing in Britain and thence imported into Gaul. Even today, Those who want to make a profound study of it generally go to Britain for the purpose. It is said that these pupils have to memorize a great number of verses, so many that some of them spend 20 years at their studies. The Druids believe that their religion forbids them to commit their teachings to writing, although for some other purposes, such as public and private accounts, the Gauls used the Greek alphabet. The Romans conquered Britain and began to persecute the Druids. The Romans persecuted the Druids, and many Druids fled to Scandinavia, according to Welsh tradition. And this has been confirmed by archaeological finds in Scandinavia. Those Druids who remained in West Britain and Ireland founded colleges and communal settlements that were based at least partly on their clans, on their clan relationships. When the Celts were converted to Christianity, the colleges of the Druids and the settlements of Druids were transformed into monasteries. Right. So I'm gonna get a scripture here. This is just to show you the Jake is everywhere, man. You know, it's not far fetched that Jake stretched to a lot of places. I'm not saying every single one, every head count was a Jake. Every head count wasn't a Jake, but the majority of them were Jakes. Just as Genesis 24 and 60. It says, and they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, Thou art our sister, be thou the mother of thousands of millions, and let thy seed possess the gate of those which hate them, right? Isaac and Rebekah, right? Esau and Jacob, right? This is speaking about Jacob, his seed, who hates us, starting off with Edom, and then all the other nations. You can read Psalms 83, right? About the confederation, about all these different nations, right? Hold on, let me actually get it, because I don't want to just say it. Yeah, 83, right? Who hates us? This is Psalms 83 and 1. Keep not thou silence, O power, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O Most High. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones, which is you Jakes. You're hidden. You're not known in the streets. Right? They have secret councils. They have the Council of Foreign Relations. They have the Skull and Bones. They have the Bohemian Grove. Right? They have different orders and different meetings and organizations and cults and secret societies. They have said, Come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom, that's the first, and the Ishmaelites, the Merebs of Moab, you Chinese, and the Hagarenes, and Gebal, and Ammon, and Amalek, and the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. Ashur also is joined with them. They have holpen the children of Lot. Selah. Alright, so anyway, I hope you're edified with that. Just going into, again, Celts, Druids, Franks, Gauls. You know, this pieces together more understanding on the Gentiles and the issue during that time period, with Paul writing those letters to the church at Ephesus, right, to the church of Galatia, right, to the church at Corinth, all these different places. All right. Kal halayim la Yahweh b'Hashem Yahushai b'Hashem Rakha HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles of GMS, that Ruel, who I learned this truth from, and salutations and blessings unto you, 144,000 and 1/3 elect. Kwam Yasharallah and Abad Babal. Shalom.